This is where we work, the corrugated packaging industry. From the paper machine that produces the special grades of paper from which corrugated sheet is made, to the corrugator that transforms that paper into sheets of various dimensions, thicknesses, and strengths, to the presses and finishing equipment that perform combinations of printing, slicing, slotting, creasing, folding, and gluing. And finally, the recycling plant that takes the used product and turns it back into raw material to begin the process all over again. At each stage of the process, there is a very real possibility that you could get hurt, seriously injured, or even killed. That's where this comes in. It's called the Occupational Health and Safety Act and Regulations for Industrial Establishments. This is the law that sets workplace standards for the protection of employees. But this little green book is more than just a dry list of rules and regulations. It's based on a philosophy called the Internal Responsibility System, which outlines who shares responsibility for your health and safety while you're at work. Who do you think is responsible? Your safety department? Your plant's joint health and safety committee? Your industry safety association? The answer is none of the above. Oh, sure, they're there to help, to make recommendations, to provide information and other resources, and in general, to assist management and your fellow employees in planning and implementing an effective health and safety program. But if things go wrong, they're not the ones who'll be held accountable, because they're not directly responsible under the Internal Responsibility System. Who is? The answer is those who plan, organize, and carry out the actual work or production in the workplace. That means owners, managers, supervisors, and workers. Legal responsibility for safe and healthy production is shared by these groups. That's what this program is all about. By the end, you should have a good idea of some of the hazards you may face in your workplace, what your company is or should be doing to protect you from those hazards, and what your responsibilities are. Because yes, you're responsible too. There are probably as many ways to be injured in this industry as there are people who work in it. But some are more common than others. By far the most common are back injuries. Each year in our industry, dozens of workers injure their backs, each injury averaging over 50 lost work days. Think about it. That's 2.5 months of pain and suffering. And once you've got a bad back, it's usually for life. There are many ways you can injure your back on the job. Trying to lift too heavy a load without help, twisting while lifting or carrying, working in awkward postures, or even just sitting or standing too long. The second most frequently injured body parts are hands and fingers. That's perhaps not so surprising, given that whenever there's any physical work involved, the hands are usually where the action is. Each year in our industry, workers receive cuts, punctures, bruises, and broken bones that are serious enough to result in lost days from work. And each year, on average, 3 workers have hands, fingers, or parts thereof amputated by moving machine parts. Picture your hand being caught here, or pulled into here. It's not pleasant to think about, is it? Mobile equipment such as that clamp truck is another potential source of serious injury. The same goes for other types of lift trucks. The transport trucks coming in and out of the yard, or even this automated transfer car. And then, of course, there are the slip, trip, and fall hazards, such as hoses or electrical cords left across walkways, or ice in the yard, or an open file drawer in the office. And we haven't even talked about longer-term hazards to your health, such as the toxic chemicals that are present in some solvents and cleaning fluids, or the all too common loss of hearing that results from exposure to too much noise. And then, of course, there are confined spaces, storage tanks, manholes, and the like. A hazard that has claimed the lives of many workers who have collapsed inside due to toxic fumes or lack of oxygen, and the lives of would-be rescuers who didn't follow correct retrieval procedures. I could go on, but the point is really a very simple one. You could get hurt working here. Your company and your safety committee are doing many things to make sure it doesn't happen. And that's what we're going to talk about next. Your company has many responsibilities to make sure you don't get hurt on the job. Some of these responsibilities are very specific, such as the requirement to establish, maintain, and cooperate with a joint health and safety committee, or the duty to supply workers with personal protective equipment, such as safety glasses or hearing protection, when and where they're required. Other responsibilities are more general, such as the requirement to take every precaution reasonable in the circumstances for the protection of a worker. Now, that covers a lot of territory, but in general, it means that your company is responsible for developing and implementing a program to identify and control hazards in your workplace. That's a pretty tall order, so let's take it one step at a time. There are many things your company does to identify hazards in your workplace. Some of them are reactive or after the fact, such as investigating accidents to determine the causes and make recommendations to prevent similar accidents from happening, or analyzing injury and illness data. While important, these are a little like fixing the corral after the horses have escaped. Better are programs that identify and control hazards before anyone has been hurt or injured. That's why we conduct thorough inspections of the workplace at least once every month, and why we conduct air or noise sampling whenever we have the slightest reason to believe there may be a potential problem. Similarly, we have detailed emergency response plans that try to anticipate problems before they happen. Everything from medical emergencies to fires or even bomb threats. That's called being proactive, and it's what prevention is all about. But what about controls? After we've anticipated potential hazards or identified existing ones, the final step is to introduce controls to either eliminate or significantly reduce the risk of anyone becoming injured or ill. Let's look at some of the hazards we identified earlier and see what's being done to control them. When it comes to preventing back injuries, your company undoubtedly provides training in safe lifting and carrying techniques. And it encourages workers to get help, rather than trying to lift too heavy a load by themselves. But the first line of defense is designing the work and the workplace and providing the tools and the equipment so that no one has to lift something too heavy, or bend, or twist, or work in awkward postures, and so on. For example, the pre-feeder on this press was installed to reduce the manual handling of sheet, and thus to reduce the load on muscles and joints that leads to back and other injuries. Similarly, this load turner eliminates the need to turn each sheet over by hand. Fitting the work to the worker, rather than the other way around, is called ergonomics, and it's the #1 tool in the prevention of back injuries. Now, what about hand injuries? There are two major types of controls we use here. As with back injuries, controls that engineer the hazard out of existence are the most effective. If machinery is designed so a hand can't come in contact with a moving part, then the hazard is largely eliminated. That's also what guarding does. Guards are simply barriers between you and the hazard. They can be more or less permanently attached, as in the housing over this pulley, or they can be guards that the operator must put in place, such as this guard that is lowered to keep hands away from moving machine parts. Guards can also be interlocked with a power supply, as in this die press, so that the machine cannot operate if the plexiglass guards are open. The best guards are those that allow the least human intervention, which brings us to our second means of controlling hazards from moving machine parts. There are obviously times when guards will not be in place, such as when machinery must be oiled, repaired, or have other maintenance performed on it, or when adjustments must be made during setups and so on. At such times, there's only one way to protect yourself, and that's to perform a lockout, so that the machine is not moving and is not capable of moving, as long as anyone is in the danger zone. At its simplest, lockout involves shutting off the power and applying your lock and tag to the power supply so that it can't be turned back on. But lockout can be more complicated than that. That's why we have a written lockout policy and detailed procedures. What are policies and procedures? Well, they're one of the main tools your company uses to protect your health and safety, so they're important to understand. A policy is simply a general statement of what should be done. For example, a simple lockout policy might read, all machinery must have all energy sources shut off and locked out before being cleaned, oiled, repaired, or adjusted. It's a general statement of what should be done. A procedure, on the other hand, is a detailed statement of how it must be done. Thus, you might have a separate lockout procedure for each machine or type of machine in your plant. Each procedure would describe when the machine must be locked out and a detailed series of steps to de-energize the energy sources associated with that machine and lock them out. If there are confined spaces in your workplace, your company will have a confined space policy and detailed procedures on how to safely enter each confined space. Developing policies and procedures and enforcing them is one of the most important things your company does to protect you. But the best policies and procedures in the world will only be useless words on paper without you. That's what we're going to talk about next. We've talked about some of the hazards you might face in your workplace. And we've talked about a few of the things your company is doing to protect you from those hazards. Now we're going to talk about something just as important. And that's your responsibility for your own health and safety and the health and safety of your fellow workers. Because no workplace and no safety program can ever be so well designed that you can't get hurt. As workers, you have 3 rights to help you protect yourselves. You have the right to know what the workplace hazards are, to be told if some part of your job is hazardous to your health or safety. If you are assigned some task with which you are not familiar, be sure you ask about potential hazards, and be sure that you are thoroughly trained in how to do it. You have the right to participate in your company's health and safety program. The most important vehicle for participation is through your Joint Health and Safety Committee, so make sure you use it by bringing any concerns you may have to their attention. Your company may also have other ways in which you can contribute. And finally, you have the right to refuse to do work which you believe may be hazardous to your health or safety. Your company has probably already explained to you the correct steps to go through to exercise this important right. But along with rights come responsibilities. First of all, you are obviously responsible for following all of the requirements in the Act and regulations. Some of these requirements are specific to workers. You have a responsibility to use or wear the equipment, protective devices, and clothing required by your employer. You are also required by law to report any defective equipment or other hazard you are aware of to your supervisor, as well as any violations of the Act or regulations. There are also several things you are not allowed to do. You may not operate machinery or equipment in a dangerous manner. You may not remove guards or other protective devices without ensuring adequate temporary protection, and you must replace the removed guards as soon as possible. You are also required not to engage in any prank, contest, feat of strength, unnecessary running, and rough or boisterous conduct. In other words, no horseplay. To sum it up, you have a legal responsibility not to do anything that compromises your own health and safety or someone else's. We talked earlier about slip, trip, and fall hazards. Poor housekeeping is a major cause of such accidents. Good housekeeping means keeping walkways free of ice, leaked oil, spills, or anything else that could cause someone to slip and fall, and clear of tripping hazards, such as hoses, electrical cords, boxes, tools and equipment, and so on. It means never blocking aisles and exits, and promptly cleaning up debris that could pose a fire hazard. It also means putting away tools and equipment in their proper places when you've finished using them. Good housekeeping is just common sense, and it's everyone's responsibility all the time. We talked earlier about your company's responsibility to develop policies and procedures to protect your health and safety. What are your responsibilities in this area? You guessed it. Know the policies and follow the procedures. Whether they're lockout procedures or confined space entry procedures or procedures on how to operate a particular piece of machinery, follow them. They may not be perfect, and if you think you know a better way, a faster or safer way to do something, speak to your supervisor or a member of your joint health and safety committee. But whatever you do, follow the existing procedure until it's been changed. The same holds true for plant safety rules developed by your joint health and safety committee. If there's a rule about not wearing rings or other pieces of jewelry, it could be because someone lost a hand or finger that way. And finally, don't take shortcuts. Shortcuts have shortened many a life. Your company will never ask you to put production ahead of your safety. I've saved the most important responsibility to the last. And that's your responsibility to yourself, your friends, and especially your family and loved ones, to come home each day with no injuries and in good health. Because the hazards are real. Your company is doing many things to protect you, but it can't do it all. You're responsible too.